Would be good. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Um, all right. Welcome to week 5 of web design decal. Hope you guys had a decent weekend. It was pretty nice weather outside lately here in California, so hopefully you got some sunshine. It's always good for you. But today I'll be lecturing you guys for this design lecture. I'm Howie, one of the TAs, and I'll be teaching you guys today on images and layouts. It's pretty interesting stuff, especially after what a lot of you guys showed me in check-ins today. So yeah. So a couple of announcements before we get started. For homework and lab submissions, make sure your zips aren't greater than 15 to 20 megabytes, or else it's going to take a long time to load preview. So like for homework 3, with the Finsta stuff, I know some of you guys try to like use like 8 megabyte images. That's freaking insane for a 120 by 120 pixel square. Keep that in mind. It's really important for a midterm project too, because like you're going to be using a lot of donut pictures, I'm assuming. And if you're for your menu, since they're not full size, there's really no reason for you to have each donut be like 3 megabyte images. So make sure you keep your zips low, the file size is low, so that you can submit properly. Yeah. And then speaking of midterm projects, our project check-in deadline is this Thursday, March 4th, before lab starts. So again, try to get your check-ins done at office hours. We posted on Piazza about adjusted office hours. So we moved everyone's Fridays office hours to sometime this week. And there's like 90 of you who still haven't gotten checked off. So just be wary that these next few days, the office hours are going to take a while. At least you might be in the waiting room for a little bit of time. So please consider that. And also I would email the TA if it says email the TA ahead of time. And then the final project is due on Tuesday, March 16th. That's in like 2 weeks or so. And then make sure you submit both on Portal and this form here. If you don't submit on one of the two, like you're going to lose points, because I know the form is where you attach your write-up to, and that's how you get points for your write-up. So make sure you submit again on both Portal and the form. And of course, you know the drill, office hours and feedback anytime. So yeah, let's just dive right into part 1 of images this lecture. So let's just get a quick warm-up and talk about these following websites. So in Zoom chat, or if you want to say it out loud, what do you think about this website? Just give me your thoughts. There's no right or wrong answer. Distracting, hurts, too much going on. Yes, preach, guys, preach. Yeah, you can just see like, what the fuck? What is wrong with this website? You know, when you first see this, it's so weird. The uses of like this background is just so interesting. Um, the fonts, the font styles. Wow, you know, I just don't know. I really don't know what to say about it. But if you know this, this is actually a band or an artist, Draft Age. This is part of their style. They do this on purpose, and not because they can't afford a design or anything. This is literally their style, but you can just see it's like purposely bad, but like it's kind of like a 90s aesthetic, I guess you can say. So, but like overall, I don't really like it that much. However, on the other hand, what do you guys think about this? Type it in chat. Corporate, nice, easy on the eyes. I would want the noodles. Indeed, I would also want the noodles if I went to this website. Yes. So yeah, this is Postmates. If you guys aren't familiar with Postmates, it's a food delivery service app, but it's much more cleaner than the last website in the last slide we saw, especially in its uses of images. It's more relevant. We have images of people, like a food. That's what this like app is mainly for, and like a phone, you know, because you can use this app on your phone. So it's like food within your fingertips kind of analogy, sort of. And it's very clean, I would say. The choices of colors is very good. You might think the yellow might be a little bit too much, but if you remember from our color lecture, we actually said that yellow is related to food. So that's why they probably use this as a background color. So you can see like we have sans serif text and like natural colors. It's a little bit calming versus the other one. And we use a lot of good spacing. So we're focused on some parts. And I'm sure you guys saw the want noodles in the first place. Like that's the first thing you focused on or somewhere around there. So this is very good use of relevant images. So speaking of image uses, we're going to talk about today. We're just going to talk about like what you can use as images on your websites or on your homeworks, things like that are very relevant to your website. So here's an example website called Weno. They just do like client redesign work. I know they did Slack's redesign a while ago, and they like post it on here as part of the website. I highly recommend you check it out. And it's really interesting because like there's not many words on this website. It's like just, as you can see, it's just one huge image, but like less than 10 words. But it's very effective because like the images are very, very important and they're very relevant to what like this article or this project is talking about on their website. And another way we have a like relevant image use is through thumbnails. That's like also the same thing as this Weno website I just talked about. Thumbnails are really important when you talk about content, things like that. So like whether you've been on Netflix or this Qflix kind of design, I think someone did this on Dribble. It's really important that you're using very relevant information. And so thumbnails, by definition, they're a small representation of a larger image, usually intended to make it easier and faster to manage a group of larger images. So I'm sure you know what thumbnails are. You clicked on those clickbait YouTube video thumbnails, or all these other like different thumbnails you can see a lot across websites. But there's a lot of different layouts you can use with thumbnails. So first of which is a Masonry thumbnail, also known as a waterfall thumbnail. And it might just remind you of Pinterest because Pinterest made it popular. But it places every like thumbnail or picture in like a vertical space in a column format. And it maintains each image's aspect ratio with respect to its width, which means that every image will have the same exact width across horizontally. And this is great for like listings and postings. Like Pinterest has done a great job with this, and it's like a really cool and unique format that they use. Yeah, and it supports like pictures of different sizes. But the con of this is that it might not favor images that are like landscape mode. Like the width is going to be the same, but it's going to be pretty small, pretty short compared to like pictures taken portrait mode in this sense. On the other hand, we have a grid layout. And if you have an Instagram, you already know what this is. But everything is cropped into a square format. And it's like a corresponding, I don't know how do you say it. It's a grid that's like the same across, everything is the same size. So this is very clean and very neat. That's the pros of it. But the cons of this is like, if your photo is not, the focal center is not in the center of the picture, then you're going to have some issues with like the centering part of the image. I know some websites like Twitter, they use like kind of like artificial intelligence to kind of tell where the focal point is. And I know that also has some ethical issues lately. But I know some websites do that. But for the most part, if your photo, like if you're standing to the side of a picture, you're probably not going to be in the center of the grid or that square on a grid layout. A couple others include Justified. So Justified is kind of like the opposite of Masonry, where it's like we maintain aspect ratio vertically, like by its height. So that means every image is going to be the same height. And this is good for like landscape images now, but now it's probably not good for portrait images. As you can see, like this portrait image is tiny compared to like these other landscape photos, which like really utilize its width to its fullest. So yeah. And lastly, we just have standard, pretty self-explanatory. Your pictures are literally the shape it originally is. And this is really ugly. I don't know when you would ever use a standard layout at all. So I don't know, prove me wrong. You can make it look pretty if you can. So with thumbnails kind of leads into the concept of icons. And these icons are also kind of like visual guides that help draw attention to action items or like context of a website. But icons shouldn't really distract from like from anything else on your application or your website, but rather like be like a visual guide for the user. So it helps make information less intimidating and it breaks it up. So like humans are visual learners. I would rather see an icon than to see the word like train or bus. Like let's take this example of someone's like Dribble transportation app design. The first thing, I'm not going to read this bus and trolley or SKM train. I'm going to look at this icon because it's so much easier to understand what this section or this button is about, just because it's a visual thing. So icons should overall unify ideas in content and personality based on this. This could go with a lot of things like color, the style of the icon. A lot of things contribute to the personality and content of your overall application or your website. So icons are definitely very important. And as you can see, this is someone's another Dribble design example of a kitchen, and it's like amazing. It's like so warm and organic. Like it's just so perfect. Like there's so many colors, but it just works out too. So the illustrations are like great, homey, friendly, and comforting. And a lot of it's based on visual data. Like you don't see that many words here. Well, actually, maybe some, but like majority of it, you're focused on the images. And by just the images, you can see like, you already kind of understand what this website or this design is already about. So images really have a very big impact on users. Never underestimate that, because again, humans are visual learners. We are visual people. So now let's dive a little bit more of the technical side. Let's just talk about image formats. I'm sure you've heard of this a lot just by trying to figure out like file pathing in like image tags or like link tags, these kind of things. It's pretty much a hassle. But we have the two most common image types, which are JPEG and PNG. So JPEGs, they work well for natural image types. So like photography uses a lot of JPEGs. However, they are very prone to deterioration as you save and edit. And I'll show you what that means on the next slide. But JPEGs are very lightweight compared to PNGs, which means that their file sizes are generally pretty small compared to PNGs. And they're used best for large images such as like backgrounds, I don't know, nature photos, things like that. So that's what PNGs really work best in. But on the other hand, JPEGs works best in. But for PNGs, the main thing that like separates PNGs and JPEGs is that PNG supports transparency. So when you save a JPEG without a background, it'll automatically make the background white. However, if you have a transparent background in PNG, it will keep that transparent background, which is great for like uses of icons or like thumbnails that might not have a background, things like that. All are very nice. And they are better at lossless comprehension, which is like kind of the opposite of JPEG. But the trade-off is like PNGs are kind of heavyweight, which means they take more space per file, depending on what you have as the content on the image. And so they're usually best for like small images, such as like thumbnails. Again, like I said, thumbnails, icons, images with transparent backgrounds. So that's really where PNG shines the most. So here's what I mean by quality loss in JPEGs over like many saves. So we have like a picture of like a city skyline, like sunset. And in one save, it looks totally fine. But like over the amount of saves, we can start seeing we see ripples in the sky, which is really weird. That means like each pixel has been deteriorating in this picture over time. And so now I can see weird ripples that I definitely don't want in an image if I want an image to be high quality. So this is what happens to JPEGs when you save it a lot. And on the other hand, PNGs don't really have this because they're they handle this better. So here's a little, I'm not GIF. Here's a meme for you. If for those who are hard JPEG people. Oh, I have a question in the chat. I've seen JPG. Yeah, JPG, JPEG is the same thing. I don't know why they have different names for it, but again, when you're coding in HTML and you're doing file paths, make sure it's case sensitive, and you there is technically a difference in that sense where it's like you need to make sure which one's spelled right, because JPEG and JPG also work. So make sure you're spelling it right based on your specific image. Yeah. And now we got through like the static kind of images. JPEG, PNGs, they don't move, but we get into the more cooler parts of like image use, which includes GIF. And here's a little GIF of a corgi trying to swim in a bathtub. Very cute. So what are GIFs? GIF stands for, and yes, I call it GIFs. I'm pretty sure that's how it's supposed to be called. So yeah, it's called graphics interchange format. You don't need to remember that, but it supports animation, as you saw with the corgi stuff. And I'm sure you guys use this a lot in like your text messages. I don't know, things like that. But it only supports 256 colors. I feel like that's a little outdated now. I think GIFs definitely support way more than 256 colors nowadays, just because technology is much better. But yeah, they used to be 256 colors only. So they're very lightweight. Again, small file size, even though it's an animation. But however, like you can imagine, like however long the animation is, or the longer the animation is, the larger your file will be. It's like a video. The longer your video is, the larger your video file will be. And of course, GIFs are best for animated images. So some really, really cool examples of like GIF use is this one website called Work. I'll actually show this. Like it's really, really cool. I don't even, is it still up? I actually don't know what it's about, this website, but it's really nice. Like, wow, what the fuck? Holy, like let's do that again. Let's revisit that animation again. It's just so cool. Wow. It's like, if any of you code this for a final project, I will like, I don't know what I'd do, but I would be wowed. I would give you extra credit for this. That's like the most I can do. But yeah, it's really cool because if you move your cursor around, you have more animations. It's pretty insane. I really love this website for its like uniqueness. But the animations, you can argue that it's kind of like extra, which is true, because there's really no reason for it, but it does give some life to this kind of website. So yeah. So yeah, the GIF use in here, or the animation use in this website, is very engaging for us users. Same thing for this app, like a sleep timer app. It uses GIFs, and it's very relevant. The animation is really, really cool and unique, because we are using a sleep app and we're dealing with day and night time, things like that, and it's a very relevant use of GIFs. And lastly, what I'm going to present to you, which is the most important, I feel like, in my opinion, of image formats, are SVGs. These stand for Scalable Vector Graphics. So if you're into math, you probably can already know what that means, but I'll explain to you for the rest of people who are not into math like me. So vectors can be scaled automatically without loss of quality. So like, no matter how big or small you make them, they're going to stay the same exact quality. If you like zoom in on a JPEG, you can start seeing like the square pixels, right? Not for SVGs. That's not possible, because they will stay the same resolutions no matter how much you enlarge, how much you shrink them. And what's really interesting about them is that they're extremely lightweight, which means they don't take that much size, which is really cool. And they're really easy to customize with like a code editor. This can be done with HTML, things like that, in addition to drawing software. So if you played with Illustrator or like Sketch, they all do export as SVGs if you want to specify the option. And these SVGs are also like GIFs where they support animation. So this is like, SVGs are a huge combination of JPEGs, PNGs, and GIFs in one, while being lightweight, which is insane to me. So one example, if you have this like SVG of this house on a hill, you can see we can convert this vector graphic into HTML code. Like you don't need to know what this means, because like if you like play around with Illustrator and you export as an SVG, there's an option for you to, I think it's like convert to HTML code, and you could copy that HTML code straight into your HTML file, and then boom, you'll get something like this on your website, which is insane. And no matter, again, however the dimensions, you stretch it, you change it, it's going to stay the same resolution. It's amazing. You guys should be using SVGs as much as you can, because these are great. And you have no excuse, because now that I've taught you this, you have the resources to do something like this. This is a student's final project website from a couple like years ago. And I'm not going to go into it, but you guys can explore their website. It's really great. There's no words on this, but it's like such a nice website, and it uses great use of like SVGs and these images for you to really engage with her website. So definitely check out her work. This as a previous student, again, you have no excuse anymore to have bad images. And so, yeah, let's see more on image use. So like I said, we really want to use context relevant images. Just because an image looks nice doesn't necessarily mean it belongs on your web page. It should have a clear and functional purpose on your website. A straightforward example, you're making a donut website, you're gonna have donuts, right? You're not gonna have like, I don't know, like pasta on there, right? There's really no reason for that. It's pretty self-explanatory. And they should have, each image should have very strong relationships with the goals. So like whether for your donut picture, it should be like, because you're trying to sell donuts, you should also make it very aesthetically pleasing. You know, you can't just take a random picture in like bad lighting, things like that, and then put on your website. Like that would not be the best as like a business marketing thing, because we're trying to get our images to really factor in with our goal. Yeah, and just like any other element of UI, it should be tested for usability. This could go for a lot of things, whether like your image is a button, things like that, or like even just a UI experience. People just seeing it should feel good, I guess, or not really confused about it. So again, relevant images are very important on your website. So one example of this is like this personalized vitamin or like pill kind of website. It's such a clear focus, or it gives you such a clear focus just from the landing page, the homepage that you would visit, because with just looking at like the background, I can see someone holding a packet saying "Hi Madison," and then the other hand is holding a bunch of pills. So with a "Hi Madison," I can see something about personalization. And then with pills now, I can see like, oh, okay, maybe it has to do with like vitamin stuff, health. So like this has a great use of imagery or images as its background, because I don't even need to read the text for me to understand what this product is or what this website is about. So again, images are all about clear focus, good relationships to the purpose of your website or your goal of your app, things like that. And yeah, that's what makes an image very useful on your website. And you should always avoid poor quality images. Like, come on, it's 2021. We are only living in an HD age. We have like 4K, 8K, like videos, these things. There should be no excuse for you to see something like this on a website. That's pretty embarrassing. So yeah. Stock photos, generally don't use stock photos just because everyone uses stock photos, and they sometimes can just be purely decorative, and they're not like really context related. If you're making like a website for like a corporate kind of, or like your team or company, you want to use something that is more genuine, right? Stock photos, these are like fake models. They model for this shit. So if you have like a picture of your actual team, you and your team on the About Us page of your website, that would be way better than you including 4 random people who model for this. So it does save time to use stock photos, but again, there's really no point in you boasting about you should to join like this company if they see a stock photo on the About Us section and they can't get to know you guys better in that sense. And again, also a little touch up again on personality. Images are very important for personality. For example, Chegg, if you've used it, Chegg is like where you find homework answers. I'm sure a lot of you guys use it, or all of you guys use it. Don't lie. Yeah, Chegg is about studying, book smart, things like that. And so they use someone with glasses in front of a computer. Personality, that's their take on personality. On the other hand, you have Course Hero. Same thing as Chegg, basically. But they have a different stand, a different personality take on the idea of studying or doing work. And here they have a little more 2D-ish kind of cartoon personality, which I honestly like much better, because it looks so much more clean than Chegg's website. But again, personality can be varying. These two websites have the same goal, but have different designs, different personalities. So it's really up to your own creativity to really portray that personality in your websites. Here's another example of Slater. This is their old website design. It's not what it is now anymore, but this is a more kind of like hip personality. They went for this kind of like hippie vibe, I guess, which is pretty cool. I really like this. But unfortunately, they don't have it. It's like all black now. I checked, I think yesterday or something. So yeah. And we also want to make things, images, text, or whatever on your websites very accessible. So for the people who came into my office hours today for check-ins, I talked a lot about contrast. And so this is where this stuff really comes into play. So contrast is the key to ensure that whatever you're trying to display gets the emphasis it deserves. So now I'll point something out. Did you see this in the slide at all? Like I guarantee you half of you did not see this. I don't even know if you can see it, like especially for like people with like visual impairments, you probably won't be able to see this at all. So yeah, accessibility is very key. You need to have contrast, especially when designing for with accessibility in mind, which is also another design lecture we'll be talking about later on. But this is also part of it. So here's an example of bad color contrast. We have the word before in the middle, but then the background like kind of has like a light colored, like sandy mountain-ish. Like the letters in on the trees, I can see those clearly, but like the B, I cannot really see that. Same thing with the E too. So one way you could really add contrast is make the image itself or the background darker. A dark on light, or I mean a light on dark is good contrast, because now I can see this after on the same background. I don't need to worry about like whether people can see this or not, things like that. Another way, you don't have to do it always like, you're not limited to just centering things or darkening things. Move things to the side. There's no rule of you saying like it has to be centered. Put the after on the water, the dark water, and then make it bigger. This also works. This increases contrast in the same way it does with this example. It's really up to you of how you want to do contrast. So make sure everything is readable. If you have even the slightest like hard time of like reading something, that means the user is going to have a hard time reading it too. So make sure you're able to see everything, or the user is able to see everything. Cool. Before I move on, do you guys have any questions about any of that stuff? About images? Okay, I will assume that's a no. So this next part, layouts, it's gonna be pretty short, but it just talks about like layouts of websites. The most common layout you'll always see is the F layout. You may have heard about this, or you may have seen about this, or even experienced it. This is F layout is the way your eye, like you as a user, browses through a website, right? You start from the top, read left to right, and then you go down, and then like whatever is more important, you read left to right too. And overall, that gives you the F layout structure of a website. So again, I said scanning left to right, top to bottom, and that's for English. Different languages may be different, because I know like Asian languages that you could read right to left, top to bottom, things like that. There's other languages that does like the complete opposite, but for the most part, as English, we read left to right, top to bottom. And it's really a good structure. I mean, like you guys make this structure, or you made it in your designs, your check-ins, without you even noticing, maybe, because this is what we're so used to, whether we're reading a book or like reading an article or browsing a website. We are so used to F layout that we just go with it. So it's always a good structure to base it on the F layout for a website. So example is like the medium top bar. So if you see here, we can like read through the medium bar up here, left to right, and then start moving down, and then moving left to right from here, or like left to right from here. And that gives us the kind of F layout that usually all websites have. Same thing with Google Drive. You have your quick access part, where the most recently open docs or whatever on your thing. That's an F layout. Then you go down into your folders. Folders are its own section. Then you read left to right in folders, then go down to the individual files in that specific folder. So again, F layout when you're reading it. However, there are exceptions to F layouts. We mentioned this a lot with all our design lectures. You're not bound to this F layout. It's just because we're so used to it that we just naturally kind of lean towards an F layout design. But as a designer, rules are meant to be broken. So you don't need to do F layout. If you think we need to do a backwards F, do it. I don't know. Break the norm. So all up to you. So the one thing I want to emphasize with layouts, and tying in with what I just talked about with images, is that like spotlight on the image is on the image to create an emotional appeal. So again, as humans, we are visual learners, and we get a lot of emotions just from visual stuff. So layouts and images kind of really go hand in hand when a user is using your website or using your app. These are very important for you to understand as a designer, for accessibility, for all these different parts of design, human-centered design, user design, things like that. So it's really important to keep that in mind. But again, at the end of the day, it's really up to you. You could have literally taken this whole design lecture with a grain of salt and not listen to anything that I said. And that's okay. So that's the whole point of design. Design, you are a trailblazer in design. So yeah. So here are a lot of image resources that you can possibly use. You've already used Unsplash for like the labs. Well, that's where we got the lab pictures, or lab 2, I think. And then you also play with Dribble. Dribble is not an image website. Never mind. That's work. That's people's work. Don't take that stuff. Unsplash, they're like high quality free images that you can use. Noun Project, same thing. Font Awesome, also used for images. And Flat Icon, I added this because it has really nice like icons for you to use as buttons, things like that. So definitely check these sources out, but also make sure you credit based on the specific website. So Unsplash, Noun Project, and Flat Icon, you need to credit the like creators of those designs or those pictures in order to use it. Unless you like pay for like a premium plan on Flat Icon, you don't need to, cite your sources. But I know Font Awesome, you don't need a credit, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, definitely check out these resources. They're really important. I use these all the time, not even in web design, just like in general. They're pretty cool. Yeah, so I think that's the end of the design lecture. Are there any questions about this? Where do we credit them? That's a good question, actually. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So normally on a regular website, like outside the scope of this class, it has to be somewhere that's readable on the website. It's the same thing of like you writing an essay and having an annotated bibliography or having like footer kind of like thing for that page. Um, the user needs to know or has to see that you took it somewhere. For the scope of this class, like the midterm project and the final project, you could cite it in your write-up. It doesn't have to be on the website. Just because we're not publishing these websites, they're not going to be public. So it's fine to just not have the site, the source cited on the website, but rather you can have it on the write-up itself. Yeah. Oh, also want to mention, don't use Google Images. It's really hard to tell whose images or designs it belongs to from Google Images. So definitely do not use Google Images for your projects or whatever you're designing, even outside the class. So yeah. Yeah, any other questions? Okay. There's no other questions. I will just stop sharing. That's all for design. And then I guess we have a break now, if I'm correct. 3 minutes break. Yes, let's do a quick break. Music, please.
Awesome. Yeah, so now moving on to the coding portion of today's lecture, we're going to be going over Flexbox and really helping you put the theoretical layouts we've been discussing for the past few weeks into code. So you may remember the box model that we've been discussing, which includes the content, which is looking back to the picture frame example, the picture itself, with the padding being the space between the frame and the photo. The margin outside of the border, and of course the border, which is the frame itself. So positioning things manually is a pain, as I'm sure many of you have already discovered, which is why we'll be teaching you about Flexbox. Before we actually move on to that, it's important to think about each of these divs as containers in a sort of parent-child hierarchy where the body is the parent of the div, which is the parent of the header, and so on and so forth. Again, looking back at this Facebook example, we can break down a layout into a lot of different components, which with some being parents of others and some being children of parents. So again, just a quick review. The orange class here is the parent of all of these other classes. And then inside we have two left and right yellow classes. And then inside of the right yellow class, we have children in the cyan and the red classes. And you can keep going. You can keep going down the layer from there. So now Flexbox. Let's say we have an HTML document like this. Now this is typically like the default you'll get when you add two elements to a page. If they're in display block, then there'll be one on top of the other, and they may take up the entire page width. And using CSS, we need to be able to tell CSS how we want these boxes arranged. So whether it be like this vertically or horizontally, so that they sit one next to the other. How much spacing should there be, and should the blue boxes be on top or the bottom of the red box or inside or anything in between. So these are some other layouts that we'll be exploring today. We can really boil them all down to using Flexbox. And before I actually move on to that, we'll take a look at this somewhat confusing diagram. And basically this is Flexbox this is all of Flexbox right here, basically. You'll have a main axis, which is by default the horizontal, and then we'll have a vertical axis, which by default is the vertical axis. I think it's formally called the cross axis, but main axis, cross axis, this is the default orientation. We can also flip that so that the main axis is vertical and the cross axis is horizontal, but we will get to that in a little bit. So how do we actually use Flexbox? So if you remember that before we explored a couple display properties in block, inline, and inline block. In this case, we'll be using display flex. Well, what does that do though? So we can apply this property on parent elements and then use flex properties on its children. So in this case, we can apply the display flex property to the best box ID, and then we can use some flex properties to modify the spacing of the two children of class child. Now, if we want to say align the two children horizontally, one next to the other, by default, we won't actually have to set it, but by default, when we display flex, it'll do that because the flex direction is row. This basically means that our horizontal axis our horizontal axis is the main axis, and our cross axis is our vertical axis by default. We can also use row reverse, which basically reverses the direction of this main axis so that instead of going from left to right, it goes from right to left. And as you can see here, the child 2 is now on the left of child 1 versus before our child 1 was on the left of child 2. We can also flip the axes around so that the main axis is going vertically. In this case, we would use a property called flex direction column, which would then put the two children one on top of the other. We can also nest these types of properties. We can have a flex parent or a flex container inside of another flex container. So in this case, we have a best box, which obviously we know is already a flex container itself. And then its two children, we can actually turn them into flex containers as well, where each of them has the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 inside, so we can see, who is who. Now, we also have obviously flex direction row by default. You can leave this out and you'll still achieve the same layout. But we can also use a property called justify content, which aligns child elements along the horizontal, well, in this case horizontal, but the main axis. And basically what it does is moves all the elements together as sort of one giant element to the center horizontally, which we can see has been done in each of these flex containers here. We can also use space between, which, as it is quite appropriately labeled, adds space between and pushes them to as far left and right as we possibly can. We can also do this with more than just 2 elements. Say we have 3 elements, then we just have equal spacing between box 1, 2, and 3. Not here, but that's certainly a possibility. We can also use space around, which basically adds equal spacing around each of these boxes. If you remember on the Finsta's homework, this would have definitely come in handy, but I think most of you probably just used set margins on the photos. So a quick summary of what justify content does. We have flex start, which moves everything to the beginning, as we know right here, as long as we are in the default of flex direction row. We can also move everything to the end horizontally with flex end, center, space between, space around, and also space evenly. We also have the by default vertical axis, which is align items. Remember that if you do use the flex direction column, then the align item, or not the align items, the secondary axis will actually be horizontal instead of vertical. We'll see why that's so helpful in a little bit. But for now, we'll work under the assumption that the secondary axis is going vertically. And in this case, the align items would basically center them vertically, as we can see here. The top and bottom with equal spacing, as opposed to something like this. We also have flex start. In this case, we're aligning from top to bottom. So flex start would be at the very top, and flex end would be at the very bottom in terms of like vertical direction. Quick summary of align items, also similar concept with the flex start at the top, flex end at the bottom, center, centered, and stretch, stretching everything out to the height of the flex container parent. Now we can also combine both justify content and aligned items to move the children around. So in this case, in our 2 child Flexbox containers, we want to move both of these children elements to the bottom right. So in this case, working under the default flex direction row, we'll be able to do that by using justify content flex end, which means we move it all the way to the right, and align items flex end, which moves it all the way to the bottom. We could also combine other properties as well. In this case, what we're doing here is centering it vertically and then having equal space between each child horizontally. So justify content, we use space between to push them to the sides, and align item center moves the children into the vertical center of the Flexbox container, which is best box. Now, in terms of the axes here, again, our main axis by default, when we're using flex direction, moves from left to right, and our cross axis moves from top to bottom. Now, remember, we can actually reverse that with flex direction row reverse, which moves this horizontal, or the main axis, to go from right to left instead of left to right. We can also, now we can flip, as I mentioned earlier, the direction of the main axis using flex direction column. Now that we're using flex direction column, our main axis goes from top to bottom, and our cross axis goes from left to right. Now, are there any questions before we move on to a quick demo? Feel free to drop them in the chat or just yell them out loud. No? All right. So the demo's a little bit beyond here. I don't know why it's at the end, but I have it open actually, sorry. So if we just do a quick demo here, let me actually show you what we should be doing. Let me go back here. So when we first open up this JS bin, we'll see a broken container, not container, but broken layout that looks somewhat like this. And we're trying to make it look like this. Now, if we take a look at it in terms of the box model, we have the container in here, or the elements in here. In the content, we have some padding in the yellow, as well as margin on the right. But looking further inside, we have this main content area, as well as 2 buttons. And what we can do is actually create, firstly, sorry, I'm trying to get up here. There we go. So we're trying to use nested Flexbox containers to achieve this look. First here to move around these 2 main elements, as well as within the sort of text and photo area and the buttons as well. So let me show you what that actually looks like in practice. So here we have the HTML file, the CSS file right here, as well as a quick layout here on the very right-hand side. So taking a look at the layout or the HTML here, we have a main container that basically encapsulates everything inside of it, as well as 2 main two main elements in the header and the buttons class. Inside of the header, we see that we have this image, I think that's the Discord image, as well as another container for the text with the text for the lone warrior and has invited you to play the game. Inside the buttons container, obviously we have our buttons, accept and decline, and we'll achieve this look basically using 4 lines of code with Flexbox. So we'll first start with a header area. We want to move this text so that it's basically to the right. Sorry, I'm like reversed here, to the right of the Discord logo. And basically what we do here, obviously we have to use display flex as we've discussed here, which makes it a little different. We don't want the logo to be stretched out, and by default align items is set to stretch. So is there a property that you remember us discussing earlier that will center the items vertically? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. I sort of gave it away. Okay, yeah, it's centered. So we come over here and type in center. We see that this logo gets centered vertically with respect to this entire container here. Now our second area is the buttons, where we want to basically move them so that we see here they're sort of aligned with equal spacing between them, with space between them, not equal spacing between them. So again, we'll want to use display flex and then use space between here so that there's equal space between. Now we could fuss over the CSS a little bit more, but that's not a huge issue. We have some time, so why not? But basically we come down here to the buttons. We see that these buttons are a lot smaller than the original. So we can add, I don't know, 10 pixels here, make this 30. And then we can also add, well, I guess we should add more padding to the left and right. So we can add like 50 pixels, see what that looks like. A little too much. 35, 45. Okay, there we go. So it looks a little bit more like what we see here. And again, really just 4 main lines here that we used, 2 of which are actually duplicates. So display flex and then aligning this area vertically and the buttons horizontally. So pretty straightforward. There's a lot you can do with this, a lot of different combinations. And yeah, really looking forward to see what you guys come up with. And I think this will be really helpful for the project. Let me see. Oh yeah, we also have Flexbox Froggy, which is like this interesting game you can play to learn about Flexbox. Let me pull it up. It actually looks like this, where you want to move this frog over to the lily pad, and in order to win, you have to make it work. So if we remember, by default, our main axis is going horizontally right now. We can use justify content and then move it to the end of the axis. And there we go. And then there's like, I think 25 of these, or no, 24 here. So if you want to play around with that just to get more familiar with Flexbox, we would definitely recommend doing that. I don't think there's anything else here. Yeah, so a couple more extra like guides, because there's a lot to Flexbox and too much for us to cover in one lecture. So feel free to check out these additional links. And of course, now that you know Flexbox, remember that you can now flex on all your friends. Any questions? If not, then that will be it, actually. So yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to stick around, but that'll be it for today. Thanks for coming, everyone.